hopefully, if you're a Titans fan, you got to hope the Mike Vrabel, being the leader that he is, which he's phenomenal, are able to keep this train on the tracks and focused on the task at hand. Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. I am joined on a Friday by producer JT, my buddy. JT, how are you? How has your week been? Are you ready to do today's show?
I am doing very well. Happy Friday to all of you. I am so ready to jump in the show. Before we get into anything, you gotta just profess your love for Taco Bell here and now on this show, because I just quite don't get it.
You don't quite get it, or you quite
don't quite get it? Yes.
Yeah. So let me preface the show real quick.
We're gonna
today, I'm rare energy today, guys. It's been a very long day, so I'm kind of slap happy. We're recording on a Thursday night. We had a fantastic interview with James Foster on a James Foster Friday, of course, that ended up going longer than I ever anticipated it going. And so I kind of scrapped what I had to talk about here at the top of the show, just because it was more John Robinson talk. We talked at length about it with James. And so I'm going to let that speak for itself. We got like 40 minutes with James. We go in deep detail on some things that you're not going to get anywhere else in the national media market about both John Robinson and our perception of what went wrong there, as well as looking at this Jacksonville game, which should come as a nice palate cleanser. I think this week in the Nashville media market, it has been so John Robinson centric. The narrative around that has been so focused on the front office moves and the drama surrounded therein, and not on the actual football being played. Part of me, side note, kind of concerned for this Titans team because of how much outside distraction there has been around inside distraction really around this team the past couple of weeks. You have the DUI incident after the Green Bay game with Todd Downing. And then last week you deal with the adversity of losing to the Bengals again in that whole narrative. But then with with John Robinson being fired, now this week it's been nothing but talking about that. And there's just no way they can fully ignore that in the locker room. I mean, the press goes in there each and every day and they're asking them naturally about John Robinson. And so this is not the time of year you want to have distractions around your team at all. You want it to be focused on ball and only ball. Hopefully, if you're a Titans fan, you got to hope the Mike Vrabel, being the leader that he is, which he's phenomenal, and Ryan Tannehill and the leaders of this team are able to keep this train on the tracks and focused on the task at hand, which is the Jacksonville Jaguars this weekend, which is the most important game remaining on the Titans schedule by a large margin, in my opinion. Win or lose this game totally dictates how the last 4 games, the last month of this Titans season can go. If they win, they are going to be buying themselves the opportunity to do a lot more, really just preparing for the playoffs over the next month. Whereas if they lose, things are going to get tighter in the AFC South race than they're going to want them to be. And so that's a fascinating element to this. Again, we talk about it with James, so I'm going to let that interview speak for itself. Before we get into that, at the top of the show, we got to start with what's important, JT, and I'm glad you brought it up. It is yet another non-football related cultural discussion that we're having. I was going to say,
I agree with everything you just said, but how does any of that do? Oh my goodness.
We're not cutting that out. We're keeping that in.
We're not cutting that out.
No,
fine.
Keep it in.
What does that have to do with Taco Bell?
It doesn't have anything to do with Taco Bell. We need to, for those that weren't paying attention to our Twitter feeds, which you should have us both on post notifications on Twitter. Obviously, we have that elite of feeds. I'm half kidding. I'm trying to pull up. Do you have the tweet in front of you, JT?
Yeah, I do. So it was another one of those weird.
It's a tweet infographic that's begging for people to retweet, and so we retweet and discuss. And it's about fast food this time. Our last discussion was about grocery stores
Costco.
and retail chains. Yeah, and it revolved around Costco and JT's blasphemous hate of Costco. Now we're on fast food, and he's attacking me for my defense of Taco Bell. So no, you set it up.
So you said it was one of these posts that says you can only eat at 2 fast food places. The rest have to go. So you can never eat at them again. And they go as follows: Chipotle, McDonald's, Burger King, Chick-fil-A, Taco Bell, Subway, Starbucks is a little interesting one on there. I don't exactly see where it fits in with the rest of them,
No,
but
it
I can
doesn't.
kind of see it. KFC and Domino's, which is not the pizza chain I would pick, but such is life. But those are the 9 options. And Easton, of course, you said.
I said Chick-fil-A and Taco Bell, and it wasn't really a hard choice for me. The rest do not tempt me. Now, before you attack me, what were your 2? Because I didn't see you put your 2 out on the internet. Did you?
So I totally agree with you. I did not. I believe I didn't, but I totally agree with you on the Chick-fil-A one.
Everyone should. That is
it's a
that's a
no-brainer.
relationship
However,
deal breaker,
I think there are maybe 4 or 5 options on this board that
Name
are
'em.
better
Name
than Taco Bell. Well, first of all, I think Chipotle is just better for the same thing that you're getting. I think McDonald's has a lot more variety and it's just kind of like a staple. I think you could also do, I think taking away Domino's there, like any pizza chain, I think is a better option than Taco Bell. I think KFC has more to offer than that. So I think those 4 right there. And then I'm kind of gonna go this far to say that Starbucks is maybe a better option than Taco Bell personally.
No.
Because I'm a huge
we need to
coffee
remove
person.
this from the. Let's remove this from the conversation. Starbucks doesn't belong in this. It's a throwaway add-in. It's a different.
But
a different
personally,
thing.
I think I'm a huge coffee person. If I could only use
that's fine. That's fine.
For the rest of my life, I maybe am tempted to use that solely because I need my caffeine in the morning.
Right, but this should be approached from a standpoint of we're talking about you need a meal. You need a meal. And you don't go to Starbucks for a meal. I mean, you don't. It'd be breakfast, but not really a full-throated breakfast. So let's talk about a meal, a fast food meal. Starbucks is out. You would, in recap, you'd take Domino's, Chipotle, McDonald's. Did you say a third one or a fourth one?
I think if I had to come down to it, yeah, maybe if we're going for straight meal here, I would pick Chipotle, McDonald's, or KFC over Taco Bell.
KFC. Oh man.
I think they have better options.
Tell me this, JT. Tell me this.
Their Nashville tenders kind of slap. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, it's fine. It's fine. It's chicken. First of all, this is about, again, we've already picked Chick-fil-A here, so I think it'd be rather foolish to go Chick-fil-A and KFC. Because if I want chicken and there's a Chick-fil-A and a KFC next to each other, I'm going to the Chick-fil-A 100 out of 100 times. I'm never going to the KFC ever.
That's understandable.
I could have Chick-fil-A every day for an entire calendar year. And at the end of that year, you could say, hey, you want to switch it up? I'll bring you some KFC, or I'll bring you your Chick-fil-A. I'd say, bring me my Chick-fil-A. Bring me that chicken.
Interesting.
That is to say, moving away from the chicken. When you go to Taco Bell, what do you order?
Me?
Yeah.
Let's see, I have a couple orders, but I got to get that Crunchwrap Supreme.
Okay.
I got to get maybe like a taco, and that's what I get.
Okay.
Maybe when they have the double steak grilled cheese burrito, sometimes I'll venture out and get that. But those are like my 3 on their menu.
Okay. I'll tell you this, JT. I don't have nearly as hot a take on this as I did, or not a hot. It was not a hot take. Costco's not a hot take. Very cold take. You had the hot take.
I had the hot
Costco. I don't have as strong of opinion on this. Taco Bell, it's like, I get why people dislike it, because it's not, when people say that it's bad, I think that's wrong. It's not like, it's just tacos. Like it's tacos and quesadillas and burritos. Like it's very staple-y in terms of foods. So if you prefer like a McDonald's burger out of the freezer, then I can get that, I guess. But Taco Bell it's terrible for you, but I think it's delicious. And I love Baja Blast. I love cinnamon twists. Like that's what does it for me. The Taco Bell, the thrills, the add-ons, that's what does it for me. Because at the end of the day, I mean, it's a taco. Like it's not a special taco. It's just like when I'd make it home. But yeah, all right. We've spent 10 minutes.
We've spent 10 minutes on it. But you know what? That's okay.
All right. Well, I'm sorry to our listeners. Hopefully you can just skip through all of that. But we do love to interact with y'all. So I'll retweet that tweet that I sent out about that. And if you have your opinions on this Friday morning when this comes out, please let me know what you would pick, because we want to incorporate some culture into this show. We want some interaction in terms of cultural choices. We find that fun. We're going to now get into the Titans news. 3 segments today, pretty standard Friday. Titans news, James Foster Friday is the bulk of our show. That's the meat and potatoes. That's what you're here for. And then we got the best bet gauntlet, which is what you should be here for, because we had the worst week as a show last week betting. But what's the name of that guy on Twitter who's been really big in sports betting lately, JT?
Book it with Trent.
No. The guy recently who's been like, there's no more dangerous place to be than losing all your bets, because it means it can only go up from here. You know who I'm talking about?
I know of Book It with Trent and like Mikey Over are two of the big TikTok Twitter guys.
Okay, I forget who this guy is, but he's popped up on my Twitter feed nonstop for the last month, and he's all these tweets, like super degenerate tweets about how he loves to gamble. And he's like, I woke up this morning and looked in the mirror and I saw a guy that's about to go 37-1 or something. Like it's inspirational gambling tweets. They're horrible advice. That's where we're at though. Like we hit rock bottom last week. We were doing really hot as a show before that. That means it's bounce back time. And this week, I feel it in my bones. We're going to win money. So that's going to be exciting at the end of the show. First, let's get into some Titans news. JT, what do we got?
Let's talk about the Titans injury report, and it's a pretty concerning one, with Trey Avery and Treylon Burks both not practicing at all yet this week with concussions. Kristen Fulton and David Long also not practicing yet this week. And Danico Autry still has yet to see the field since his knee injury. And then even more concerning news, after Jeffrey Simmons has kind of been off and on here with limiteds and whatnot, Jeffrey Simmons was downgraded to a DMP after practicing in limited fashion. Easton, what is your take on a lot of these guys who have yet to see the practice field this week?
So let's take them one at a time. With Autry, I've not expected him to be back for a while now. I think that there's a chance we don't see him again until like the last week or two of the season, maybe even not until the playoff. With Jeffrey Simmons, we've been talking about this for about a month now. He's not right. I'm not sure can get right this season. Those kinds of ankle injuries, and we don't know the specifics around his ankle injury, but they can be the kind of thing that you need months off to heal. Otherwise, it's just going to continue to nag you. So with that, I think that he's gonna play this week like he has every other week. But I think if they win this week, they will consider resting him until the stretch because they need him badly, as well as Autry. With Fulton, that's one of the other guys who hasn't practiced at all this week, correct?
Mm-hmm, correct.
Yeah, he's that's the hamstring again, right? He continues to have these hamstring issues. I don't think he's going to play. This has kind of been him this season. He's played a game or two and then had a week off. Played a game or two, had a week off. He can't get that hamstring right. Another soft tissue thing that just keeps nagging and it's not going to likely heal this season. So he's going to have to just manage that pain, manage the injury. Again, he's the kind of guy that might play this week. But if they do end up winning this game, I think that we could see him shut down for a period of time in preparation for the playoff. Was Trey Avery on that list?
Trey Avery and Treylon Burks.
Yeah, so with Trey Avery, we talk about this at length with James Foster later in the... I forgot who our guest is this week. That's embarrassing. We talk about this at length, and he is big on Trey Avery, and he's kind of sold me on him. We need him to be available for this game to maybe even be any good. And I say we, not as like a Titans fan perspective, but just as somebody who has to watch this game and wants it to be entertaining. I think that this Titans secondary is in trouble if they don't have Avery and Christian Fulton out there. I think they're in big trouble. It's McCreary, and then you're dusting off Terrence Mitchell. It's tough scene if they don't have him out there. Now he's in concussion protocol, if I'm not mistaken, and that means likely I would be leaning towards he's not going to play. And so that's a real bummer, just based on the way that concussion protocol has been handled this year, post the Tua situation early on. Rarely have we seen these skill position guys and or cornerbacks come back from concussion protocol within the same week. We just saw Ben Jones, after seemingly have no injury, have a concussion and be out for 2 weeks. Like, they're taking this very seriously. The Titans in particular are taking this very seriously. So I'd be very surprised to see either Avery or Burks. I'd be very surprised. Frankly, I said this on the Mike Herndon show earlier today. I'd be very surprised to see Treylon Burks next week. He seemingly lost consciousness when he went down in the end zone. That was a nasty hit. His head hit the ground with significant force. Unless he's just really young and resilient and it wasn't as bad as it looks, I kind of think this is a multi-week thing for him, and they know they're going to need him right for the playoffs. With concussion coming back early from one, we know that if you get a second one, A, it's much easier to get a second concussion after your first, and B, it is significantly, it's magnified. It's a multiplier effect, right? If you get a second one while you haven't fully recovered from the first, it can knock you out for weeks to months. And they can't have that. This team has to have Burks available for the playoffs to have any chance. And so all of those guys, I think they're going to be really not timid, but cautious with this week. And frankly, all the guys that haven't practiced at all this week, Friday, of course, is always the most telling of all the injury reports. But I wouldn't be surprised if none of them play, frankly.
Let's move on to another big factor in this game. It's going to be on the special team side, as wide receiver CJ Board has yet to practice, dealing with a rib injury, and Hassan Haskins was limited twice this week so far. So, Easton, who could you see fielding punts and kick returning this week if either of those guys can't go?
So special teams coordinator Craig Aukerman was asked about this today at his press conference. The first name that he dropped was Racey McMath, who was returning this week from IR. This is his first action since the preseason. He's been dealing with a soft tissue, I believe it's soft tissue hip injury that they haven't specified. I think that'd be incredibly foolish. They should not be doing that simply because this team is currently on, I believe they're down to 3 active receivers. You've got Cody Hollister on the IR. I believe his season is almost certainly done. You have Treylon Burks certainly not going to play this week. You have CJ Board, who is a wide receiver who, A, you don't even want out there to begin with, and B, is banged up, and we'll see if he can even play. They're down to basically Robert Woods and Nick Westbrook-Akine and Racey McMath and CJ Board if he can play. Like, it's again, a very tough scene. You can't risk a guy who's just coming back from IR. You had Mike Vrabel earlier this week already talking about how they know with Racey, he's in a situation where he can't handle the volume, at least not yet. Why in the world would you risk losing another wide receiver on punt return with, especially sending out a guy that you know is not 100%? That is incredibly foolish. So if it's not Board, they may go McMath. I think that they absolutely should not. If it comes down to it, I mean, just put Robert Woods back out there to just fair catch it. Like, it is an untenable situation any way you slice it. Ultimately, you need Kyle Phillips back to be any good at that. CJ Board was pretty good, but he's just having a hard time staying not banged up because he's got a really slim and slender frame. And when he's having to play a lot of snaps on offense already at wide receiver, because they're so banged up at receiver, it's not a good recipe all around.
Let's move on to the Jaguars side of the ball, and the biggest one is Trevor Lawrence has not yet practiced this week, dealing with a toe injury. So we're going to have to see if he practices tomorrow or today on Friday morning, maybe even in a limited fashion in order for him to go this weekend. Easton, what have you been seeing here in the media? Do you think he's going to go? What do you think?
So we've been seeing and hearing nothing but he's going to play from the man himself, from his head coach, from all of the media covering Jacksonville. It's been a unanimous he's going to play. That tells me that it's a pain management and or rest management situation, load management situation with him not playing this week on that injured foot. But it also tells me he's not going to be 100% this weekend. That's significant because he's a guy that isn't known for his mobility, but his mobility will be advantageous, of course, and he can move. I mean, he's a young guy. He's an athletic guy. He can move, and so I don't think he's going to be anything but really a statue in the pocket. I could be wrong, but based on what we've seen and heard, if he's going to play and give it a shot, it's going to be in a somewhat limited fashion, and that's frankly good news for the Titans.
A couple of stories in the Titans secondary as well. Elijah Molden is once again headed to the IR for the second time this season, although he will still be eligible to return this season with the new rule change and whatnot. So maybe getting him back for the playoffs, maybe this is the time to do it. They feel good about their chances of making it still with that comfortable lead. And then Caleb Farley had surgery to deal with his herniated disc in his back, and he looks to be ready for next season maybe. So it will be kind of a last shot, at least for the Titans. What is your take on him getting the surgery?
So I think it was pretty clear when they announced that he had another back injury, another spinal injury, that he would be getting some kind of surgical procedure. He ended up getting that done per his social media accounts, his Instagram stories. Yesterday evening, I believe, he said that he was getting surgery. This morning in LA, it was confirmed by Adam Schefter on Twitter that he had gotten, I forget the exact name of the procedure, but it sounded serious. It was a spinal procedure on the slipped disc that he had, or the disc issue. I don't know the exact nature of the injury. needless to say, it's really tough for the guy. You feel for him. He's not even 25 years old yet, and he's had 2 ACL repairs and 3 back surgeries. It's tough because he's a really, really gifted athlete physically. When he was healthy in college, he was a freak athlete, so much so that it made him a first-round prospect. It is going to take a medical miracle for him to work out with the Titans. They probably are going to keep him at least one more year because just financially, it doesn't make any sense for them to move off of him. They could end up moving off of him if he's a total disaster next offseason. In the preseason, they may end up making him a camp casualty and cutting him because he's just so bad they can't even afford to keep him around, and they'd take the financial hit. I lean towards if he's at all serviceable, they'll probably keep him around for at least one more year and give it a chance because they had so much sunk cost into him. And because, again, if he somehow becomes medically viable, he has the traits to be an elite cornerback, and he could start that development. It's a long shot at this point, and it's tough.
Let's move on to more of a frustrating and just kind of hilarious note. Let's talk about how abysmal Dennis Daly has been and continues to be. So James Foster, friend of the show, who we have on today over at No Flags Film, put out a graphic looking at the highest sacks allowed total from 2014 to 2022. So a decent sample size here. And Dennis Daly is not on this list once, but twice, holding the highest percentage for this year at 2.8%. And then he's middle of the pack, I think around 18th or 19th on the list, with a 1.8% rate back in 2019 when he played for the Panthers.
Yeah, I'll save my thoughts. We have a clip today from today at Titans headquarters over at First Tennessee, what is this, the Sounds? Over at St. Thomas Sports Complex from the offensive line coach, Keith Carter. He was asked about kind of all of these things, the state of the union with this offensive line and the left tackle position in particular, what his thoughts are there. Let's hear what he had to say.
He's proven I think Dylan's proven in the last, I don't know, however many weeks that he's gotten better inside, and he's a big body and stays in front of people and protection and all those things. So, to me, I think he has improved inside, and I think it's shown. And who knows what the future holds, but as of right now, I think he has excelled by moving inside and getting reps there and doing all those things.
So the general vibe, and there was more, but I didn't want to play the whole interview. He goes on to talk about how he's not nearly as inclined as the betting public in Nashville to just go with the next best option at left tackle and bump Dennis Daly out of the starting rotation. He thinks that that's the best option they have, which frankly is a scathing indictment of the options that they do have. But also, Titans coaching staff, for some reason, continues to cling to the fact that they think, I guess not the fact, their opinion, that Dennis Daly has not been nearly as bad as folks make him out to be. Now, they say that, whether they believe that or not, we have to take their word for it, but there's a chance that they're just saying what sounds good, and in reality, they realize, as we do, that he's been a total dumpster fire. The numbers, as well as the eye test, do not bear out the fact that Dennis Daly has been good. In fact, they bear out the fact that he has been the worst offensive lineman in the entire league that has been a starter at the very least. And so it continues to be a dumpster fire, and I don't really have anything else to say besides I think that I lean towards they should play Radens on the outside, but also I trust Keith Carter and I trust Mike Vrabel as a coach and an evaluator of his players. And listen, if they say Dylan Radens is a guard, I believe that Dylan Radens is a guard. Now, whether or not that guard could play on the outside at tackle where he used to play better than the guy playing there who stinks, it's another question. And frankly, I think that he could, but this team thinks that he couldn't, and so Dennis Daly it will be.
One final note here. Let's leave on some good news for the Titans. Since 2020, the Titans are 13-2 against the AFC South and have been the most dominant against divisional opponents out of anyone in the last 3 years. They've bested the Chiefs, Bills, Cowboys, and Packers in that statistic. So it's got to at least make you feel pretty decent about their chances this week.
Listen, what do you say in the NFL? If you win your division, you got a chance every single year. And the Titans are on their way to their third straight comfortable division win. They have only lost 2. That's an astonishing number. I feel like it's been more than that. But they've only lost 2 games in the last 3 seasons to AFC South opponents. Once to the Phillip Rivers Colts and once to the not Broncos. Gosh, man, it's getting late for me, isn't it? once to the Texans last year in the rain. It's a sign of a very good, well-run organization when you can consistently, each and every year, handle what you need to handle first and foremost, which is your division. And the Titans continue to do that with relative ease, and they should be praised for doing such. Mike Vrabel is a fantastic coach, and he has his priorities straight, that's for sure. All right, JT, that has been the Titans news. Thank you to producer JT for running that down for us. Now, let's get to our interview with James Foster. He needs no introduction. It is a James Foster Friday, and we talk everything. John Robinson, Titans, Jaguars. It's a fantastic conversation. Truly the best we've had with him all year long. It's a great time, and I think you'll enjoy it. So let's get into our interview with James Foster of No Flags Film and A to Z Film Room. All right, it's a Friday. It means it's a James Foster Friday, and that means we are joined once again by friend of the show, James Foster from A to Z Film Room on YouTube, No Flags Film on Twitter. James, welcome back. How are you, man? How's your week been?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing good. We're talking, of course, about the Titans today, and before we get into our usual discussion about the upcoming opponent, the Jaguars, wanted to talk about the news of the week surrounding the Titans, and it's been one of those weird weeks in the middle of the year where the focus on the actual football side of things has been very secondary in the Nashville media market. It feels like we haven't talked much at all about that. Let's touch on John Robinson. You ended up putting out a video the day of the firing because you're just a content machine. You pumped one out and went through, I thought, a really nuanced and detailed way, all of the things that ended up leading up to the firing of John Robinson, the personnel mistakes, the decisions he made in the past year, 2 or 3, that led down this road. I wanted to get just your general reaction and your thoughts on this decision and the timing of it.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of had a conflicted reaction. I think my first reaction was just surprise. I mean, I was in a recording session for like 3 hours, so I was actually pretty late reacting to the news, but
oh, really?
Yeah. So first I was like surprised, and then immediately I start to work on the John Robinson video. So first thing I do is I pull up Titans draft history, and just like kind of like having it all laid out like that. I'm like, well, yeah, I can see,
Yeah.
I can see fire. I mean, that's not great. And then when you consider the free agency, success rate, but at the same time, I don't know. I think it's risky. I don't know that
Agreed.
It's guaranteed at all that you're gonna be getting an upgrade at general manager. Like, I still think that John Robinson's a top half of the league GM.
Yes.
So yeah, that's a bold move, and it's kind of just one of those things that we have to see how it plays out. I'm excited for the GM search, where we all like pretend to have any idea how these guys, like, how good of candidates.
I know.
Oh, he was the Chiefs, player personnel director. They have good players. So he's good. I mean, it's
great logic. It is also funny to me how we always establish, like, GMs rarely get a second chance, and then you see people's boards of potential GM hires, and it's all former GMs.
Right. You're right.
It's probably somebody we're not going to see coming out of nowhere. It was the most shocking move that the Titans have made. It's funny that when it happened, it reminded me of, and we were together for this, the most recent shocking thing like that to happen for the Titans was when they traded away AJ Brown on draft night. And it reminded me of that clip of us live streaming and reacting to that insane trade that many are tying directly to this decision. I think we can agree that it was far more than ultimately the move to go away from AJ Brown and draft Treylon Burks. But that's certainly one of the things that piles up on the top of the heap. I think that was one of the things you pointed to in your video, if I'm not mistaken, as kind of an inexcusable decision on his part.
Yeah. I mean, my reaction at the time and kind of for the month or so after that was like, there's got to be more to the story.
Agree. So you and I both. Yeah.
Holding off my judgment because it's such, like, on its face, such a bad move, because number one, you have trading away the best, you've got the Titans history with being unable to secure a number one receiver. You trade them away, and the compensation wasn't really that good when you look at it and compare it to other receiver trades that have gone down. So like, you get a first round and a third round pick, that's fine. But at best, you're replacing the value 1-to-1.
Yep.
So, at the time it's like objectively a bad move, but it's almost such a bad move that I just assumed there had to be more to the story that I wasn't privy to. Like, if he was
medicals that we didn't know about.
Yeah, like could have been a medical thing. The thing with the contract negotiation, at this point, my conclusion is that John Robinson just backed down way too quickly and, panicked in the moment. But there's the possibility, like it really could have been that AJ Brown was just being so unreasonable and
or just wanted out. I mean, he could have just,
yeah. Unfortunately that's really like as far as I can go. And, like I said in the video, I try to be as process focused in my analysis as possible, but with general managers and like, I don't know, who in the organization was in favor of each pick and each move. And at a certain point, you just have to look at the results and be like, it wasn't good enough.
Let's talk about the Titans and the Jaguars this week. This will be a refreshing discussion because frankly, there's only so much to talk about with the John Robinson story because there's so much unknown. And it's been a week full of beating that horse.
Can I add one more thing on John Robinson?
Please beat the horse one last time.
All right. We got to not do the thing that we did with Todd Downing and Tim Kelly, where all the good plays are Tim Kelly, all the bad plays are Todd Downing.
Yeah.
All the good picks weren't Mike Vrabel's guys, and all the bad picks, John Robinson's guys that Mike Vrabel like hate. Every a team's draft grade on a player is like accumulation of.
It's a group project.
Scouts, the GM, everybody has their input. And so I'm sure that there were specific moves, just like as it is with any player evaluation situation. There were draft picks that Mike Vrabel wasn't a huge fan of the player and, John Robinson was, vice versa. But, let's try to limit the revisionist history. And I'm sure that like I will, completely.
It's very easy to fall into.
That's what I'm saying, because it is fun. It's just going back and looking at all these kind of seemingly innocuous comments from Mike Vrabel and just kind of weird things. Like
it's so fascinating.
I think it was on F Words. They brought up the Josh Reynolds situation, which I had never thought about before, of like how he seemed kind of like that high end wide receiver 3 type of player that would provide some value for the Titans. And really bizarre that he was never given more of a chance and was essentially like mutually they moved on.
And then was immediately good in Detroit.
Right. Yeah. And so there's a lot of things that you kind of can look back on and reevaluate, and they make more sense now.
Little breadcrumb quotes that Vrabel has left along the way. No, I agree entirely. I also think it's funny. People seem to think, at least this week so far, that the Titans are more likely to look internally than they are to look externally for a GM hire. And I think it will be very funny if the Titans do hire like a Monty Ossenfort or Stretch, which I think would be a disastrous idea. It'll be funny to then hear like, well, these guys that were a part of John Robinson's team and helped him make all these picks, they didn't have anything to do with all those bad picks. Like this is It's a fresh guy, new blood. No, man, like everybody in that building had a role in that. You should be looking at on the outside, at least in my opinion. Do you think that they should look externally for somebody to hire?
I think they should. It doesn't really have anything to do with the player evaluation. Like, Caleb Farley and Dylan Radins, all these bust draft picks. It's not like, oh, everyone in this organization doesn't know how to scout. You got to find someone from outside. But I think finding someone that maybe the way that they view the game is a little bit more 2013 than 2003, maybe
progressive. Yeah.
And I think that Mike Vrabel, honestly, despite his old school kind of,
I think he's kind of ready for it.
I think he is. Well, I think he's just naturally, I think he's a way smarter person than people give him credit for. And I think people are sort of coming around to that, because I remember when I was, when he first came, And like I would be watching games with my friends, and I'd be like, he'd make some dumb challenge call. I'd be like, oh, there's CTE Vrabel. Those were the jokes that we would make, because it was like the idea. You just think of Mike Vrabel, it's like, oh, he's this like meathead kind of raw guy. But I think he is really analytically focused, and
even though he outwardly hates analytics. Yeah.
Does he outwardly hate analytics?
Well, there was a press conference in particular that I have in mind this past offseason where I think it was Kaharski really pressing him on the lack of an analytics staff and what Vrabel thinks about analytics, blah, blah, blah. And Vrabel's like, yeah, I look at them and then I go out onto the field and like what I see out there doesn't always align with what I read on my computer. So I tend to go with what's out there. And it's like, okay, well, it felt like a roundabout way for Vrabel to maintain that exterior of, I hate analytics me caveman manalytics. But in reality, I think he considers all of it. I think he finds the happy medium, which is the right place to be, by the way. Analytics as law is as stupid as hating analytics, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's actually I have a theory that there's a lot less actual, a lot fewer actual anti-analytics coaches than it seems like. I think, bashing analytics is a really, it's a kind of a crutch topic that like older coaches.
It's like a generational thing.
It really does seem like a generational thing. Like, like how many boomers have you heard complain about participation trophies? Like I played, Y League basketball my entire life. Immediately, throw away the plastic trophy. It didn't, like, kind of BS stuff like that.
We all agree they're stupid, but like,
yeah, I think it's like Mike Vrabel, they all kind of do this where it's like, the analytics, we get out there and it's the best 11 and play foot. Like, it's just, I think it's just kind of a thing that they say. And honestly, when they go into press conferences, I assume that they don't want to be there. And so I
you don't have to assume. I know.
Mike I kind of take everything that they say with a grain of salt, because I think a lot of stuff could just be, all right, what's the easiest answer that I could give
so I can get out of here and do my job. Yeah, no, I agree entirely. And that's why ultimately I'm hoping and excited for them to get some fresh perspective from the outside in there. All right, now let's talk about the Jaguars, which this is, in my opinion, James, by far the most important game left on the Titans' schedule. If they win this game, it will afford them essentially the ability to rest, recover, and tinker for the remaining 4 games on their schedule, because they'll almost certainly be locked into that 4th playoff spot. And the Jaguars will mathematically be dead in the division. The Colts will be 1 win or loss away from being dead in the division. They'll be sitting pretty. We talked about that on the show earlier this week. However, if they lose, it then becomes kind of a white knuckle thing, because the Jaguars will be 1 home game in week 18 away from owning the tiebreaker over the Titans, in which case the Titans would have to, at the very least, do the best in those other 3 games, do the same in those other 3 games as the Jaguars. And so it'll become kind of tighter than Titans fans would want it to be if they were to lose this game. So it's an important one, and I'm sure the people in the building recognize that as well. I feel like Titans fans, and this is very much a vibes-based take, but I feel like Titans fans with both the Texans and the Jaguars, but especially the Jaguars, have gotten so lax over the past couple of years. And frankly, how could they not? Because the Titans have had no trouble against the Jaguars for, it feels like, 3 years in a row now. It's been the only team in the league, good or bad, that they've had consistently no problem with, and that's including the Texans. This feels like a very different Jaguars team than they've faced in a long time. And although it's still a very young team who's mistake prone and has a hard time finishing out games, outside of last week, if I'm not mistaken, they had been in almost all 1-score games all season long and just couldn't find a way to win in the end. But they're able to put up points. They're a young team with a good head coach and a quarterback who's making a second-year leap that I think we expected him to. What are your thoughts generally on this game and how it might go?
Yeah, I remember, man, I think the Jags are just a better team than the Titans, honestly.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. When you just like stack the personnel up.
Do you mean on paper, just comparing rosters, or do you mean their ability to win, or just everything?
Well, the thing with close games is I'd assume a lot of that is just noise, statistically, until it's something that extends through multiple seasons where the team just consistently can't finish close games. If there's a bunch of 1-score games that, go in one direction,
typically that's the case. Yeah.
Like I just try to watch the actual game and use the eye test. And I think
my point in saying that is that they're not a walkover team. Like they've been in the games all year long.
Yeah. I mean, they're certainly an evenly matched team for sure. But I think especially when you factor in the injuries that the Titans have right now, I think I would probably give the Jaguars an edge just in total personnel. I always get on this podcast and just have no idea about what the injuries are for the game because I don't follow injuries. This is the time of the week where I learn about who's
this is
injured.
your injury learning way.
I don't know.
The biggest concerns this week are Autry, of course, and then the receiving core with Burks not being there are the big ones.
Are we expecting Trevor Lawrence to play? Because obviously that's
it's interesting. So he hasn't practiced so far at all this week, but everything you read and see and hear from him in particular, he has said he expects himself to play. Doug Peterson expects him to play. The beat writers all say he expects to play. Now, if he doesn't practice all week, it feels like here's where we're at, James. I think he's going to play or at least try, but it's one of those things where he's for sure not going to be anywhere close to 100%. His mobility is going to be significantly limited. So that may or may not play a role if the Titans pass rush can't do anything again. But this Jaguars offensive line, although good, it's nothing compared to the Eagles offensive line.
Right. Yeah. The Eagles offensive line is just an impenetrable,
it's unreal.
I mean, I don't want to be like the guy that just has, one player or one take that they just, always complain about. But I mean, watching Bud Dupree and really the entire offensive line, just I don't know. When you look at the true pass sets and stuff where it's just third down, you got to have pressure. They can't get it done. They really don't have anyone besides Danico Autry and Jeffrey Simmons for the first half of the season that can consistently get pressure. And so when you face these really bad offensive lines that have never seen a TE stunt before, and you get a ton of pressure that you can scheme up, it's a really good pass rush. But when it's just one-on-one situations, fan protection, they just don't get it done. With the Jags offensive line, it's pretty solid. Jawan Taylor is a player that has really stuck out at right tackle as kind of having a breakout season. And, I was working on a Trevor Lawrence video last week and then he got injured. So I kind of shelved it, but I ended up watching most of his dropbacks from this season. And he's been so impressive over the past 5 weeks. He's been playing a top 7, top 8 quarterback.
Wow.
And the statistics aren't quite there, but when you look at efficiency stuff, efficiency numbers, he doesn't really have the volume stats, but efficiency numbers are pretty good, especially towards the end of the season. And, just the clean throwing motion that you saw in college and the way that he's operating Doug Peterson's offense is pretty impressive. And so, I think the Jags have the best quarterback in the division, but outside of that, not a ton of really high-end talent offensively. It's still sort of something where you've got Trevor Lawrence getting the most out of not the best group of weapons. And then, defensively, which we can get into, they're a team sort of like the Panthers defense, I would say, where they have the personnel wise, they have a lot of really exciting players, but just as a cohesive unit, they don't perform as well. But I think this is a team with a lot of young talent. And then, what the Titans have working for them is that Mike Vrabel has shown to be a pretty effective coach when they're in these back against the wall kind of situations.
It's fascinating to me. I agree entirely that at his best this year, Trevor Lawrence has looked like that dude that we expected him to be. There was a game, I forget who they were playing.
Broncos game was awful.
Yes,
maybe one of the worst individual quarterback performances of the season.
Yes, he's had some real consistency issues, but when he's been on, I forget the game in particular. It may have been the Ravens game, but I rarely watch any film outside of the Titans. But I watched, and it wasn't just raw film. It was somebody's video that I stumbled upon on YouTube in this game. It may have been the Ravens game, but one of his more recent games, he hit like three or four hole shots that were just had to be pinpoint accurate. And it blew my mind watching.
He had this one down the left sideline to Marvin Jones. I talked about this in a Trent McDuffie video, but it's like, Trent McDuffie's just in perfect coverage 25 yards down the field. And he just throws this hole shot against cover 2. And like, it's just the perfect combination of a beautiful throw and great timing by the receiver, because Marvin Jones just has no separation, and then last second dives out 5 yards of separation, perfect pinpoint accuracy. His ability to throw down the sideline is really impressive to me. The thing with Trevor Lawrence is like, and this really goes for all players in terms of how we evaluate them after having opinions on them during the draft process, and then we get to see what they do in the NFL. Players that you like, players that I had high evaluations on during the draft process, they're going to get a lot more benefit of the doubt with their performance in the NFL. So like a player that I really liked coming out, they can enter the league and struggle for longer than like a 6th round pick can. And I can still, be patient with them and expect them to turn it around. And Trevor Lawrence has had a stretch of like 5 back-to-back just lights out games. And so it's kind of like the thing where, this is a quote unquote generational quarterback prospect. And when it looks like they're putting it together, I'm just going to be a lot more willing to kind of extrapolate that into the future and be like, yeah, I think he's going to go on a run. Could be wrong, but he's got the talent, really just has everything that you want. Outside of some accuracy issues accuracy is probably the one thing that he struggled with in college and still has struggled with in the NFL.
Let's keep talking about the Jaguars offense before we talk about the Titans a little bit more. I wrote this down in a list I put together in the offseason of potential off-season story topics. I never got around to writing this one, but it reminded me today when I was preparing to talk about the Jaguars a little bit about this. And I went and I looked on PFF to see if this story would still hold any relevance. And in hindsight, I wish that I'd written it. But it was going to be about just how important it would be when you're facing this Jaguars team to have solid slot corner production, because I felt like they had like 2 or 3 slot receivers on their team and not a whole lot of on guys that can play on the outside in traditional wide receiver roles. And of course, Christian Kirk, I go and look and he's number 1 in the league in both receptions and targets from the slot. So like that's been their thing. Laviska Shenault also in the slot as well. This team is
Shenault plays.
Sorry,
Panthers,
not
right?
Shenault. Yes. He's a former Jag. I'm forgetting the
they have
who's there.
Zay Jones, Marvin Jones. Who else are they throwing the ball to?
It's a long name. Yep, I'll pull up the roster here in a moment. But there's 2
Jamal
receivers.
Agnew.
It may have been Agnew. This is a couple hours ago, so maybe I'm remembering things wrong. But regardless, I know for a fact that Kirk in the slot has been their number 1 receiver, and he's been playing from the slot more than anywhere else. The point being, who in the heck is this Tennessee team going to roll out to cover in the slot? You would love to have had Elijah Molden back by now. He's back on IR. We don't love the production from some of the outside guys that have been moved inside in a pinch this year. McCreary has been playing a lot of slot, more than we would like to have seen him play, and it's not been great from what I hear from folks like you who grind the tape. They could play the big nickel stuff, but as much as people like to dump on Kirk for not being a true wide receiver 1, he's going to, I feel like, beat up on any safety that tries to cover him from the slot. What would you do trying to scheme up a game plan to cover this slot attack?
Can I give you a hot take? The Titans,
no, on the Hot Read podcast. we need very vanilla takes.
Fully healthy, the Titans' best starting 5 in the secondary.
Okay.
Kevin Byard and Amani Hooker, Christian Fulton and Roger McCreary. In the slot, Trey Avery.
Okay. So we are all in on the UDFA rookie.
I watched the Eagles game, and like I think that it wasn't as bad as it looked for Trey Avery. Because I mean, the first one, the touchdown where like it was kind of similar to the Bengals playoff touchdown that AJ Brown had, where it's just like he literally just has his hands out. It's like not even trying to catch the ball. It's you say late hands as far as like flashing your hands right when the ball's getting there. He doesn't even. It just literally drops into his.
It's in a bucket.
Chest. And
even though Avery's Velcroed to him,
like he's in phase, and I hate saying the corner should have turned around, because it's like, yeah, obviously, but that's literally the most difficult thing to do in football is be running full speed and then just know when to turn around and then maintain your momentum and not get beat over the top.
James, they should be watching the Jumbotron.
I try to avoid telling people to turn around, but yeah, I mean, honestly, I think he leads the NFL in passes defense over the last 3 weeks. I saw that stat today.
Yep.
And he's a better athlete than Elijah Molden by a really wide margin.
In what way? Shiftiness, top speed, just in general, you think he's a better athlete?
I mean, he was like 90th percentile in the short shuttle and 3-cone drills. Really good 40 time. They're both undersized, but I mean, yeah, that's the reason that Trey Avery was, I don't know what his eligibility was, but that's the reason that he got a chance as a UDFA and that he wasn't back in college this year, because, I mean, out of like 400 corners in FBS, he ranked dead last in EPA per target.
Right.
Last season, like yards per cover snap, all this stuff, he's in the bottom 3. And I watched the film. He was just getting cooked on a snap-to-snap basis.
That's what Mike Herndon said. He said that it was purely, when I talked to him about it, he's like, this was purely a traits move by the Titans, just taking a gamble on a guy that had the traits. So,
and it could have been something. I didn't go back and watch his 2020 film. But I saw he had like a pretty high PFF grade and didn't give up that many yards. So I assume the tape was better that year. So it honestly could have been a situation where they met with him. They're like, hey, why was the film so much worse this year?
Hey, why'd you suck?
Like, I had this knee injury, whatever. It gave him the reason. And they were like, okay, we'll give you a chance. And he's clearly shown, I need to look this up, but I bet the splits for Trey Avery, when you compare covering a top 5 wide receiver versus not covering a top 5 wide receiver, would be pretty striking, because he got cooked a couple times by Stephon Diggs in week 1 and then gave up a few plays to AJ Brown.
Outside of that, he's been clamps.
Yeah, so if he gets matched up with Christian Kirk in this game, it'll be a good test to see if he can handle above average receivers, because he was locking down like Trent Irwin against the Bengals.
Yeah, he was. You're right. On that same route, they ran at him 3 times.
Not that impressive. So yeah, I mean, this will be a test. I think honestly, if there's one position that the Titans have just shown that they can find guys at slot corner. So, that's something.
So you think if he becomes a guy for this team that is, a starter moving forward, you think slot is where they'd have him? He's not an outside guy to you.
Yeah, he just doesn't have the length, and size to. I think the fact that he can play outside in a pinch is just another thing that makes him valuable. But I think his best position long term is in the slot for sure. And I'm sure that when they added him to the roster, like that was their intention for him. I don't think that they're ideally looking at him as an outside corner.
Let's talk about the Titans now a little bit. And a big topic for the entire season really has been this offensive line. But recently it has shifted to, hey, this offensive line, we used to talk about how it sucks so much because it can only run block. And now it can't run block anymore. This Jaguars defense, like you said, kind of a collection of exciting players that doesn't really match up all that well together. It's like it was assembled by a GM who doesn't know what they're doing. Just a thought.
Yeah. It was assembled by every person who has ever like written a mock draft for the Titans and given them 1 million linebackers. Like the investment in the linebacker position for this.
Do you know what it is, frankly? Do you remember this past spring when we did an episode where we both did mock drafts and built a whole team with players from this year's draft class? It's probably like what my team looks like in hindsight, where you just pick good players, but there was no philosophy involved whatsoever.
Yeah, it's, Tyson Campbell is probably in my opinion, the just consistently best player on the Jags defense. I've been super impressed by him.
Really? You never hear him talked about. That's fascinating.
Shocking that there's an underrated cornerback.
And that James Foster found him. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but Tyson Campbell, I've been really impressed with him. Trayvon Walker is looking like an awful pick, honestly. And now
for value, or you think he's just not a good player?
Well, I think it was bad value because he's not a good enough player to be drafted first overall. So
right. No, I agree. But if we blind test, you don't know where he was drafted. Is he not somebody that you're like, yeah, he's probably going to turn into, like, if I told you Trayvon Walker, 6th round pick. Oh, he might be a serviceable starter.
If I did a redraft, which I'm thinking about doing, like a redraft.
Of course you are. Yeah.
I would probably, my guess is that he would be in the 10 to 15 range. Definitely not the top 10.
Okay.
So yeah, because he doesn't really have any moves is the thing. It's kind of just like rushing down the middle of people. They try to use him in different ways, like dropping him into coverage. I don't think they use him that creatively or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously his athletic traits are insane. So
right.
He could be, this is not a pick that really the evaluation should be done in the first year. So I'm probably just, being a Jags hater for that. But yeah, I don't know. I would be, if I were a Jags fan, I would be feeling pretty down about that pick right now.
Hey, speaking of Jaguars linebackers, before we get off of this tangent, this reminded me, remind me what your opinion of Devin Lloyd was coming out. I know we talked about him at length. They recently benched him for Chad Muma, another guy we talked about out of, where was he? Montana, Wyoming. I knew it was one of those states, out of Wyoming. And it's been like 2 or 3 weeks now with him. What were your thoughts on those guys coming out? And have you paid any attention to how they've played?
Yes. So Devin Lloyd was, I can't even remember where I had him ranked as like positionally, because I had honestly like 10 linebackers that were in the 25 to 45 range. Like it was super consolidated.
Oh yeah.
This linebacker class. If you remember that, like I viewed them almost all as mid to early 2nd round picks.
You did.
Devin Lloyd just has crazy arm length, which I'm always a sucker for. Especially, any position where you're going to be interacting with blocks, having that extra length just puts you in so much more control of every interaction, and really instinctive coverage player. But the main issue with Devin Lloyd for me was just age, and was he kind of maxed out? He came in like first 5 weeks was playing really well. And I think he was PFF's highest graded linebacker over the first 4 or 5 weeks. I remember seeing that as a stat. And then he kind of just gets lost. One thing I've noticed is like misdirection, read options. He really lacks the ability to like play 2 assignments at once.
Mm-hmm.
If he bites on the pull, or if he bites on the handoff, like he cannot get back in position to react to the quarterback run, and motion throws him off, gets his angles messed up. So that's, and then also tackling has been an issue, which,
hey, by the way, I pulled up your draft guide. This was 2.1. I don't know. That's not the latest version, is it? Is that the last version?
The rankings will be off.
Okay, because you had him as number 1 overall at his position in your 2.1.
Yeah, I know. I ended with Quay Walker as my.
I'm about to say you loved the yeah.
But yeah, he was second or third, so I was high on Devin Lloyd. And then Chad Muma, I watched a couple games. It's hard to get Wyoming all 22, and I'm too bougie to watch broadcast film. So
you had him as 10th positionally.
Yeah, so that's a grain of salt evaluation because these other players have their whole season, so I'm watching like 6 or 7 games.
But has he done well in his limited action this year?
I've watched a lot of the Jags defense. I see him kind of making like unblocked cleanup tackles. He seems to me like a kind of just a limited potential player. I think he'll be a solid linebacker, but I think just the investment in that position, you pay Foyesade Oluokun a huge contract. He's been really inconsistent from what I've watched. So yeah, I mean, they have a top half of the league linebacker room for all of their investment that they've put in it? I don't know.
Yeah, they've invested quite a bit, and that's a great question.
Another shout out for Jags defense, Andre Cisco.
Yeah,
crazy athlete coming out of Syracuse, but just
is he a rookie or is he no he's free safety,
second year player. He was really raw, like mentally, just football IQ. But yeah, he's flashed a few times. He had that I can't remember if he knocked out like Juju Smith-Schuster. It's hard because
that crazy hit. Yeah.
I actually don't watch that much live football. Like I almost never watch the Thursday night, Monday night, Sunday night games.
Such a sicko, man.
Because it's like, all right, well, I'm just gonna watch this when the film comes out. So
right, that's fair.
I'm not gonna sit here and waste 3 hours.
Will you sit and watch Red Zone at least? Like, are you actually doing?
Yeah. No,
okay,
I mean, I always have.
So you're watching football on Sundays, but you're not.
Right. I always have football on in the background, but I'm honestly kind of out of the loop relative to how in the loop I am on a lot of other stuff with football but the point I'm trying to get to is that like the one thing with watching the all 22 is a lot of times you lose context, and so I'm not aware of like penalties or like just kind of stuff that the announcers would fill you in on. But he had just some crazy hits, and I think he was getting flagged for them, but just like a heat-seeking missile playing over the top, crashing down on those routes over the middle.
All right, let me get the train back on the tracks here. We went on a nerd tangent on the Jaguars defense, but my point in ever bringing them up in the first place was this Titans run game, offensive line, been on a total free fall for 2 or 3 weeks at least now. This feels like the spot where you've got to right the ship. And for a number of reasons. First of all, this Titans offense without Treylon Burks simply cannot operate without the run game existing. It can barely operate without Treylon Burks with the run game existing. It certainly can't if the run game doesn't exist. So they need to get that sorted, and it needs to have some amount of impact this week. I personally would consider it kind of a 5-alarm fire situation if it looks the same this week against this Jaguars run defense, which has been bad this year. What do you think about that? Do you think that this is the spot where you need to see something, or else you just declare it dead until further notice?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's already kind of like sound the alarm time, but
sure.
If they can't get any push against a pretty, I would say, like below average defensive front, average to below average, depending how you look at it. Yeah, that would be even more concerning.
Like this, Josh Allen's a good player, but like Fatukasi, Robertson Harris, Devon Hamilton, like these guys they're not world beaters. You should be able to handle these people.
Yeah, it's going to be rough. That's the thing with like the push to have Dylan Radins start at left tackle. I think I would probably agree with that he should. But
it was shut down hard today by the Titans
I think
defensive
if you
offensive
put
line
Dylan
coach.
Radins in at left tackle, I think the run game gets even worse.
Yeah, because he can't run block.
Imagine that. He's the worst run blocker that I have watched this year
in the league.
Yeah,
worse than Dennis Daly.
Oh yeah, he's worse than Dennis Daly.
Wow.
If I was looking on my huddle, so I've like closely, in depth evaluated 35 offensive linemen this year.
Okay.
And yeah, Dylan Radins is the worst run blocker.
Which is such a shame because he's been such a pleasant surprise in his pass blocking ability.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think, pass protection is just so much more important than run blocking normally. But when you're already committed to this version of your offense,
I'd say with this team, you
lives
can't.
Or dies with the run game.
Yeah.
I can sit here and say like, yeah, they need to open up the offense, drop back, pass the ball.
Pass to whom?
That's in terms of what they need to mold their team into for the future. Right now, they're stuck with this, and like best case scenario is that they consistently turn into the Packers game. Worst case scenario is that you see the Eagles game over and over again.
Yep.
So yeah, I think there's a cap to how explosive this offense can be, but
Ray Sipping Math's about to make you eat your words this week, man. You don't know.
Could be, but we're past even talking about, what's the ceiling for this team? They need to stop, losing 2 yards on every first down run.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. All right, well, James, we've kept you long beyond the time that you've given us. We really appreciate your time, man. Great conversation today. You brought it. We appreciate you. Hope you have a great weekend, and we will talk to you again next week.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Hey, by the way, before you go, don't go. I forgot. How ungrateful of me. Let's plug your stuff over at YouTube. On YouTube, you can go find James at A to Z Film Room. What have you got besides the great John Robinson video that you came out with this week? What do you got going on?
First video we did this week was a Myles Garrett film breakdown, who is my vote for Defensive Player of the Year.
Wow.
Yeah,
I've not heard that name thrown around at all. It's just been the Micah Parsons show.
Yeah, I mean, Micah Parsons was my guy to start the year, and it's neck and neck. It's honestly to the point where it's like whoever I watched most recently, whoever has a better game in the past week, honestly, that's how close it is.
You think if the Browns weren't just like super middle class, it would be more of a talked about conversation, just a matter of Cowboys good. We're going to talk about Micah Parsons.
Probably. I don't really consider like team success for that kind of stuff, but
I know you don't, but the rest of us do, who watch football like live.
I mean, Myles Garrett has a PFF pass rushing grade of 93.7, which is
holy cow,
highest in the PFF era. Second highest was Myles Garrett last year with 92.
That's crazy, man. That's insane.
Example. Yeah, and dude, you watch the film. Because he can do every single move because he's like the best athlete of all time. So most pass rushers have like their one move in their counter. He's just throwing the entire kitchen sink at like these poor offensive tackles that are just it's fun to watch.
Let's pray the Titans don't pull that card in the playoffs anytime soon.
But yeah, so definitely check us out on A to Z Film Room on YouTube, and then follow me on Twitter, No Flags Film. And yeah.
All right, man. We'll talk to you next week. Be good.
Have a good one.
All right, JT, it is that time of the week. It's my favorite segment that we do each and every Friday. It's the Best Bet Gauntlet. Last week, very forgettable week for us. We went 2-8 as a show, and that is by far the worst we've done all year. We've had more winning weeks than losing weeks this year.
That is
our
true.
records currently. You sit at 29-31-5, so you can get back above 500 this week. Rooting for you to do so. I am still at 33-29-3, so I'm still making money. Would love for you to join me, but not surpass me, because we like to make money across the board here. However, I am beating you currently by 4 games. We have our 5 picks this week. Just before we even get into it, pretty brutal slate. Some ugly picks in here. Now, there's some ugly ones that I love. Don't get me wrong. And I've got some numbers to back that up. I'm assuming that you do as well. So, let's see. We tied last week. Both went 1-4.
We did.
The week previous, I was the loser. So that means remains my serve. So, with my first pick, I'm going to go with the Ravens catching 2 points. Now, it's going to be the Tyler Huntley show. They are playing the divisional rivals, the Steelers, this week. I think this is just a sell high spot on the Steelers team, who's had kind of a revival. They move on from Mitch Trubisky, and they get their guy that they drafted in there, and he's looked good. I mean, listen, I would not have taken Kenny Pickett where they took him. However, I do think that he is the best quarterback that they have, and he's shown some flashes of competency. They also have some weapons for him, and so that's helping out. The defense is playing well. All of that is to say, I think this is the spot where they trend back in the wrong direction, and this season is ultimately a wash for them. They don't really have any playoff chances. This Ravens team does. And we've seen this Ravens team in the past without Lamar and with Tyler Huntley at the reins do pretty well. And this team knows that the Bengals are breathing on their necks right now. They don't want to be the wild card again. They want to win this division, the Ravens do. I think that they win. These games between the Ravens and the Steelers always end on a field goal differential. I think the Ravens win by 3 and win outright, but at the very least, I think that they cover +2.
Alrighty, so with my first pick here, I'm going to go with one that I feel pretty good about this week, and it's going to be the Giants at home dogs of 7. And if you're looking to bet any game at all this week, I would think about this one. If you're just doing a blind bet on home dogs in December of 7 or more, they are 55% against the spread in the last 30 years. That's not just the last 2 years, that's 30 years.
It's a big sample size.
It's a big sample size here. In December or later, teams with a win percentage of 90% or more are 25, 53, and 1 against the spread, and 32%, 8 and 32 and 1 on the road.
8 and 32. Holy cow.
It's not very good, and that is both of these. That fits the description for these Philadelphia Eagles. However, this is also kind of a peak market value for Philadelphia as they beat up on the Tennessee Titans last week, so it's a great spot to buy on the Giants here. And Jalen Hurts, might I add, has been a completely different QB on the road. He has not looked like the MVP caliber quarterback that he's being made out to be. So given all of that, the Giants at home being a divisional game here in which the playoff hopes for these Giants are still very much alive, I like the Giants.
I like that pick a lot. I'm going to ride with you on that one. With my second pick, the Week 14 Best Bet Gauntlet, I'm going to take the game that has been talked about all week long as the most confusing line probably of the year. I'm going with the Motor City Kitties. They are hosting the 10-2 Minnesota Vikings, and on the surface, this is an insane line. First of all, the Vikings, who haven't been favored in 15 years, I'm pretty sure, the last time that they were favored in any one game. They're favored at home, granted, but against a division rival that is 10-2. This Vikings team is being sold on so hard by Vegas. And Vegas is begging you to take Minnesota. That's why I'm going to take the Lions. And I have some numbers to back that up. It's interesting that this is such a big differential in their records. However, if you look at their past couple of games, the Lions, frankly, have been the better team. The Vikings were outgained last week by the Jets by 200 yards. They only forced the Jets to punt one time, and they somehow stole that game. The Vikings have been stealing games, frankly, all year long. If you took both the one-score games, which we've established on this show, for the most part, is typically just noise from an analytic standpoint. It's typically a regressive stat. There's a lot of luck involved. It's kind of a coin flip situation. If you took all the one-score games this year and flipped the outcome, so the winner, the barely winner, and the barely loser now become the barely loser and the barely winner. The Vikings go from 10-2 to 1-11, and they're the only team in the league right now eliminated mathematically from the playoffs. That's how lucky they've been all year long. So they continue to be in these one-score games, and they continue to barely eke out a win. I think that ends this week. I think the Vikings are just not fraudulent, but they're not nearly as good as their record indicates. And the Lions, their offense has been on an absolute tear. I think Jared Goff is playing some of his best ball right now. I expect the Lions, with a frisky defense now, mind you, they started the year with one of the worst defenses in the league, but it's been quietly pretty fun to watch in the past 5 games. Their only loss in the past 5 games, by the way, is to Buffalo, on Thanksgiving in a game that they contended to all the way down to the wire. They're playing their best ball in genuinely decades. I like the Lions to win outright.
With my second pick here, now this is going to be one of my trademark picks on this show where I'm kind of going more on vibes as I have many
Vibes
times
pick,
this
baby.
year.
Let's do it.
I'm going to go with the Cardinals home dog of +2. It'll be interesting to see what the line movement is going forward here on this pick. However, I'm going basically on just how I'm feeling. It's a primetime game here in which the Cardinals really don't have a lot to play for anymore. However, they're finally getting the full offense back, and the full offense kind of for the first time all season, as much as they can. With Zach Ertz out, I know it's pretty tough to kind of see what the Cardinals could have been, but now they have D-Hop, they have Hollywood back, they have James Conner healthy, and they have Kyler coming back this week to play a Patriots team that has not looked the greatest in the past 2 games. Of course, they kind of kept pace with the, as you kind of pointed out, the fraudulent Vikings, and they kind of got absolutely stomped on last week by the divisional opponent in the Buffalo Bills. So this is a spot where I like the Cardinals at +2.5 at home.
I like that pick. My third overall pick in the Week 14 best bet gauntlet. It's tough, man. I'm going to roll with the 49ers. They were on my short list here. Frankly, this is not a vibes pick, but a very simple handicap on my part. They're hosting the Buccaneers, who got a last-second victory last week against their divisional rival, the Saints. I think that this Buccaneers offense is just really bad, and they, for a couple of games in a row now, have only shown up in the final minutes. I think this is a game that even with Brock Purdy at quarterback in for Jimmy Garoppolo, the 49ers can win with their defense alone. I know that I'm having to eat the hook here, so 49ers -3.5, but I think at home, they win this game by a touchdown and relatively comfortably. I think that it's just a matter of 2 very different classes, and the 49ers are the clear better team.
With my third pick here in the best bet gauntlet, it's going to be a homer pick for me here. I'm going to take the Bengals, who currently sit at a 5.5-point favorite at home here. And this one really comes down to they have looked very good against the spread in the last 4 games that they've played. They are 4-0 in the last 4 games that they've played, whether that be the -7 that they got against the Panthers or all the way down to last week where they were +2.5 against the Chiefs here. I think this offense is finally starting to get it together. As you can see kind of in the performance last week against the Chiefs, this offensive line is finally getting everything put together and is starting to make improvements on what this Bengals team was last year. I think with Jamar Chase now back in the fold against this Browns team, I know the Browns kind of had their number, but last time they didn't have their number 1 weapon in Jamar Chase. I also think if you look back at last week, yes, the Browns got Deshaun Watson back, but they did not score a single touchdown on offense. Their touchdowns were provided to on the defensive side of the ball, and then Donovan Peoples-Jones
That's not happening
one
again.
back in a punt return. It's not happening again. I wish it was, since I did have the Browns defense in fantasy. I'm not like fair, but I just kind of have to boast there. I don't think that's happening again, and especially now the Browns having to go on the road, I like the Bengals to win by a touchdown.
JT, last week, my grossest pick all season long was the Rams. Taking the Rams in that spot. They ended up covering against the Seahawks, and it was my only win of the week. I may have outdone myself here with the grossness of these picks. With my 4th overall pick of the Week 14 Best Bet Gauntlet, let's ride with the Broncos. Broncos country. We're going to ride against the Chiefs. Hear me out. Chiefs have, in fact, won 13 straight against the Broncos. I'm not expecting the Broncos to win this game. Not at all. Okay, this is Broncos +9.5, and I think there's a chance we get to 10 by the end of the week. Their only loss, excuse me, let me rephrase. The Broncos have only lost 1 game this season, despite how bad they've been. They've only lost 1 game by double digits. And that's what they need to do here to not cover, essentially, is to lose by 10 or 11 or more. They've only lost 1. This defense has been phenomenal. And frankly, every single Broncos game this year has been a rerun. It's been a close game in the teens, and the Broncos barely lose. It's been that every single week because this Broncos defense. I mean, last I checked, the Broncos defense was on pace to be the best defense per DVOA in the entire league, and the offense was on pace to be the very worst defense per offense per DVOA in the entire league. It's an astonishing feat of mismatched offense and defense. The unders for the Broncos, by the way, 11-1 this year. That bodes well for a big spread. I think this is going to be a lower scoring game, which means the Broncos are going to be more likely to cover a big number, like 9.5 or 10. Mahomes, by the way, is a 7.5 or 7 or more, rather, point favorite on the road in his career. He's 7-0 straight up, but he's 1-6 against the spread. So he does not cover. And it's just a ton of points in what I think will be a very low game, certainly a low total game that Vegas is laying. So give me the Broncos in a gross pick, plus 9.5 against the Chiefs.
I think you managed to make that one sound less ugly than it really looks on paper.
That's right. I did my research.
Very interesting there. But I'm going to keep this rolling here with my fourth pick. And yes, you might be saying JT's going with the homer pick, but I'm also kind of going to still fall into the villain role on this show. And I am going to take the Jags +4 here on this best bet gauntlet. And it's not because I don't think that the Titans can win this game. I think they very much can. Now, the big part of this one is if Trevor Lawrence is going to play this week. If he's not, then maybe I'm just out of luck on this pick. But
now, no. If Lawrence doesn't play and we find that out before the game, we'll let you slide another line in there.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
Yeah.
I'll make it a head-to-head. I'll bite the bullet on what Vegas wants me to do, and I'll take the Vikings or something.
Okay.
We'll take
so you'll take the Vikings if
me to play.
Trevor doesn't play.
Yeah, sure.
But we're assuming he's going to play.
But if he is playing, I think not only do I think the Titans can still win this game, it just comes down to the matter of fact is I don't think Treylon Burks is going to go this week. I don't think that this offensive line can get very much better. I think Derrick Henry could run for them on the day, but like we've said all year on this show, the Titans do not score in the second half. And if there's a possibility that we see this come down to the wire again, in which the Jags are driving in the fourth quarter, and this game is a 1 or 2 point game here. So I like the Jags at +4. Maybe we'll even get 4.5 somewhere down the line if tomorrow or today, as you're seeing this, that Trevor Lawrence is looking like super questionable. So I could get some more room for more points and he ends up playing or something like that. But I'm going to take the Jags.
All right, with my fifth and final pick, we already talked about this, JT. Frankly, it wouldn't be a best bet gauntlet if we didn't have a head-to-head. So we're going head-to-head here. With my fifth and final pick of the Week 14 Best Bet Gauntlet, I am going to ride with the Bills, giving 10. Bills -10. They are hosting the New York Jets. And the handicap for me is really simple. I think that Mike White, as good as he's been, is getting a little bit too much credit for tearing up a horrendous Chicago defense and then a really sneaky bad Minnesota defense in the last 2 weeks. I think this is a totally different spot for a relatively green player, no pun intended, for the Jets, but he's not got a ton of experience, and he's now going on the road in upstate New York, Buffalo, against the top 10 defense in the league, who's getting guys back like Jordan Poyer. They, of course, have lost Von Miller for the season now, but they still have some absolute elite players on that defense, and I think that this is just a completely different situation for him. I think the Jets are going to be outclassed, and I like the Bills to win this one pretty comfortably, especially considering this is a revenge game, and whenever two teams in a division play each other for the second time, I tend to like to pick the team that lost the first.
I kind of agree with you there on the Jets losing this one. I don't expect them to do what they did when they hosted the Bills last time, but I think really what it comes down to here is that, like you said, Mike White might not be as good as he's been in the past couple games, but the move from Zach Wilson the last time these two teams played is, if not just a lateral move, it is an improvement for this Jets offense. I think they've been cohesive enough to where they're going to be putting up more offensive yards and maybe scoring a lot more than they did in this first game. And I just don't see in this scenario where the Bills absolutely blow them out. Like you said, they do have some tough spots now to fill on the defense. And Also, this Jets defense, we can't count them out either. They're playing up. They have the advantage against this Bills offensive line, who has been kind of poor throughout the year and just kind of has been in the shadow of Josh Allen just being absolutely awesome. So I'm going to take the Jets here to not exactly win, but cover 10 points.
All right, so that is our best bet gauntlet for week 14. To recap, JT, he is rolling with quite a few underdogs here, it looks like. Your only favorite is the Bengals to cover 5.5. Then you're rolling with Jags +4, Cardinals +2, Giants +7, and Jets +10. I am riding with the Ravens +2, Lions -1.5, 49ers -3.5, Bills +10, and Broncos +9.5. Best of luck to everybody betting. We would love for you to bet along with us and tweet us about it. And that's going to be it for the end of today's show. Before you go, we need to, you thought that you'd escaped all of our selling points this week. No, you have not. I still have to read them off to you, but I'll make them really quick because this has been a very long episode. Number one, it's a video show on YouTube. If you haven't been watching, you've just been listening the whole time. At this point, it's too late. But for future reference, go to YouTube and watch on YouTube at Broadway Sports Media. On YouTube, you can find all of our Hot Read podcast video shows there, and they're gorgeous, and our beautiful faces are here for you to watch all of our pretty graphics and all of that fun stuff. Also, if you are a potential advertiser with us and you have a product, you are a business owner or employee of a business you think would be a great fit for us in the Middle Tennessee area, we would love to have a conversation with you about potentially advertising your product here on our show, as well as on our other shows on the Broadway Sports Media Podcast Network, as well as on BroadwaySportsMedia.com. Please reach out to us via email. You can find that on BroadwaySportsMedia.com, or you can reach out to us via Twitter or Facebook on social media. Hit us up. We'll just have a conversation, see what we could do about getting your products advertised to our listeners. Make sure to become a Broadway Insider if you've not already. Just 99 cents for your first month. That's practically free if you use code Insider. Get you access to great stuff like the full Mike Herndon show, which I'm the executive producer of. That will be out today as well for you. And we go through film each and every week, as well as talk about some things behind the paywall that you don't hear genuinely anywhere else in the national media market. It's some fascinating conversation that we have with Mike. If you know anything about Titans football, you know Mike is fantastic, and you'll want to check that out, as well as all of our premium and early access articles you get on the site. Only if you're an insider, so go and become one today. Finally, we need you to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. First of all, bottom line request here. If you don't subscribe to the show, I'm not sure what you're doing. How can you be unsubscribed to the show, but you're listening to the show? That's really, really foolish of you. Subscribe so they're delivered to you each and every time that they come out. Also, leave us a rating and review. It takes 10 seconds. Scroll to the bottom of the feed on Apple Podcasts. You can leave a 5-star rating and a review in 10 seconds. Genuinely, it takes you longer to unlock your phone and hit play on this podcast than it will to leave a review, and it helps us out tremendously. So please actually go and do it. We will be tremendously thankful, as well as read it out on the show. And with that note, we do have a review to read on the show. Let me pull it up here, JT. We do promise that regardless of what you say, and you shouldn't be profane, by the way, because Apple does block those out. We don't end up getting to see those. But regardless of what you say, we will read it out on the show. And this one is interesting. This one sounds like it comes from somebody that we know, JT. We might have to do some digging on who may have left this because they seem to they're talking to us like they know us. I cannot. I'm vamping because I'm trying to find the show. Here we go. The Hot Read Podcast. Scroll to the bottom like you have to do to leave a review. And here's the review from last Friday. It says, love your show. Love how it started. 5-star review. It goes downhill from here. I have to read. I'm reading this verbatim. My name is Easton Freeze. I think Gabe Davis is the best wide receiver 2 in the league. Also, JT is a stinky, stinky boy. Also, you're allowed to cut the music out when you talk, or at least turn it down after you transition. Hit me up if you want better beats than Chris. Yeah, so this person knows us and our fantasy league, it sounds like, as well as our friend Chris, who's done the music for the show. I have a short list in my mind already who this could possibly be, and I'm going to come to your house and beat you up for it. But we appreciate you leaving a 5-star review and listening to the show and supporting us. Be more like our friends and leave a review. By the way, leave your Twitter handle. We'll follow you. We'll tell all our listeners, our hundreds of listeners, to follow you as well. That's going to be it for today, JT. A wild and chaotic show, but a great one nonetheless. I will talk to you again on Sunday night show, Monday morning. Don't miss it. We'll be reacting to the Titans-Jaguars game. Big game, in case you haven't been listening for the last hour and a half or so. It's a big one. We'll have plenty to say, winners and losers, on Monday. Until then, I am Easton Freeze for producer JT. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. Have a great weekend.